This is the time of year we talk football, we talk baseball, but no, the Sixers and Ben Simmons and now Joel Embiid are completely taking over our lives this week. So getting more into that, former Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com and now working for Liberty Ballers, the one and only Paul Hudrick joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Paul, good to see you and publicly congratulate you on your new gig. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Josh. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm very, very excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited to talk to you. I just wish it was under little bit less ridiculous circumstances because, on Friday, Shams goes on that show, drops what he said about the Sixers and Ben Simmons. Then he writes the article on The Athletic. And then Keith Pompey reports what he reports yesterday. And then Joel Embiid decides to tweet up a storm. So, of the last several days, what is your reaction to this? Basically, there's more than just smoke. There is a full-blown fire here.
Yeah, the word that keeps coming back to mind to me is disappointment. Just when I think about everything the Sixers and the fans really have gone through for the last, bunch of years, not first everything they went through with the process, and you thought like, hey, here's the fruits of the process are Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. At least we have that. We have two all-star players, which is a lot more than a lot of other franchises can say. We have two young all-stars that haven't even hit their primes yet. And, a lot of disappointment along the way when you talk about, Sam Hinkie and that situation, Brian Colangelo and kind of how that, was kind of a disaster, the Jimmy Butler situation, Brett Brown losing his job and the ill-fated Al Horford, Josh Richardson experience, all this that we've all kind of gone through. And now here we are, and it's just more drama. With Ben Simmons now, it seemed to me all along like his camp was on the same page as the Sixers. The Sixers were exploring options to trade him, and Rich Paul and Clutch and his camp, they were willing to accept the trade. Now it's to the point where you see that report yesterday, and this isn't just we're okay with a trade. This is we are hell-bent on a trade. We are desperate to get traded out of Philadelphia. So I'm just going to keep coming back to that word, Josh. It's disappointing.
Should we read anything you think into the timing of all this? Because like I said, this is typically a week that it's all about football, it's all about baseball, and we're talking Ben Simmons and the Sixers all of a sudden.
Definitely. Timing is a huge factor. Training camp begins on the 28th, so we're rapidly approaching that day. That'll be here before we know it. So I think a big part of it is, in order to try to accelerate the process, the best way that they could do that is to hold, for Ben Simmons to hold out during training camp. That's one way to kind of try to see if you can get the Sixers to really budge and make a trade happen. Is that going to work? I don't know. Let's see. Maybe Daryl Morey decides to play a little chicken with it and says, all right, then hold out. If we don't see an offer we like, we're not going to trade you because his value's not going to get any lower if he holds out. Certainly not going to get any higher either, but it's going to stay the same whether he holds out or not. So the teams that are interested in him are still going to be interested in him. So I do think the timing is purposeful in that, you kind of got the sense, Josh, at least for me, that they were willing to take this thing into training camp and perhaps into the season, and wait to see what happens with Damian Lillard. Wait to see what happens around the league if another deal shakes loose, or one of the teams that really wants Ben Simmons starts to get a little antsy and ponies up a little bit more, or gets a third team. Just opening up the possibilities for something better. And this seems like the response from Ben Simmons camp is, no, we're not going to afford you that luxury. If you're going to trade me, do it now.
I'm glad you mentioned the two things there. One, the multiple teams that are still interested in him. And two, the fact that this might be involve a third or a fourth team. Because I've said multiple times, Paul, I just can't see a scenario where you could have a 1-for-1 trade. I just don't see how the money and the logistics work out. And even the James Harden trade ended up being, 4 or 5 teams at the end of the trade. That's James Harden, for goodness sake. So, Ben Simmons is not James Harden. So, to me, this is not going to be an easy trade to make. And I still hold to the theory that, listen, Daryl Morey might be asking for the stars, but he might have to land on walking on the clouds. And this might be all a negotiating tactic to force another team to maybe bite a little extra hard on their lip and give you something. Because at the end of the day, you're not giving up Ben Simmons for a bag of basketballs.
Right. Even though some fans would be perfectly content with that scenario.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. The guy's a 3-time All-Star. He was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, I get it with the deficiencies. I get that he's been a disappointment in the postseason. But this is a guy that's 25 years old and still has a ton of value around the league. And you look at franchise, like let's say, some of the teams that are really interested in him. A team like Minnesota. In Philadelphia, our expectations are a championship. That's what everyone wants. That's what everyone expects. You have an MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid. You have a coach in Doc Rivers that has won a championship. You have a guy in Daryl Morey, an executive that's been close. That's the goal. That's what everyone wants and expects here. A team like Minnesota, if Ben Simmons goes there, plays with Karl-Anthony Towns, and they make the playoffs, Ben Simmons will be a god in Minnesota. Like, the bar is just not the same. So I think, a team like Minnesota will pony up. They desperately want Ben Simmons. They really do. Now, to what you kind of alluded to, what does the package look like? A package that just includes Minnesota for Ben Simmons is not attractive. You're either taking back D'Angelo Russell's contract, which yuck, or you're taking back, like Patrick Beverley and Malik Beasley, which those players in a vacuum are fine. They're good players. They could help the Sixers, and their contracts are reasonable, but that's not enough. That's not nearly enough for Ben Simmons. So I've always been of the belief that if a team like Minnesota is involved, they're going to have to get a third team, fourth team, to your point about the James Harden trade. It's going to be a complicated deal, and that could be a part of it. Part of it could be that Daryl Morey's just, this is a guy who's responsible for orchestrating one of the most complicated and elaborate trades ever to get Robert Covington to Houston. So, these things take time. It's not unreasonable to think that it has taken him this entire summer to kind of try to cobble something together. So, yeah, and I would say, as much as I think when I first saw that report, Josh, my reaction was, oh, man, this is really going to hurt them as far as trade value and leverage. I don't know that it really does, because he's still under contract for 4 years, even if he sits out. And the teams that wanted him before still want him, and there's still a market there. So I don't think, does it hurt their leverage? Perhaps, but I think it's getting exaggerated a little bit how much it's going to hurt their leverage.
Paul Hudrick joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, at Paul Hudrick on Twitter, community producer for Liberty Ballers. Go check out all of his work over there with Liberty Ballers. He's now there, former Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. Paul, the other side of what's happened is Joel Embiid decided to tweet away today. And I want to start with the slightly more serious point. And, Paul, I want to get your point on this. I've been saying for about a week now, since last week actually, that I think that we need to be more, us as media, have to be more upfront about this. Joel Embiid coming out and saying, I never said this USA Today report is not true. We've heard the Tyrese Maxey rumor that he was demanding out of Philadelphia, that's not true. We got to highlight the fact that there are certain people who are credible reporters in this business, and there are other people who are just vomiting stuff out there for clicks. And I think, for a lot of fans out there, they may have trouble differentiating because they don't live and breathe this every day like we do. I think it's very important that we differentiate that, listen, this is the reporting, this is our opinion, this is our analysis, and we are not taking our cues from random dude looking for click vomit online.
Yeah, I mean, there's and I don't want to, get too much into it, but the idea, Liberty Ballers, we didn't run with that report about Tyrese Maxey because I didn't feel great about running with it because I couldn't substantiate it and it didn't feel right. And then you saw that reporter retracted that report today. So I think, yes, that's, part of it is, as a fan, like you said, Josh, they're not living and breathing this like we are. Part of my job is to sit on the internet all day and find stuff and decipher, is this credible? Is this worth writing about? Is this worth digging into further? That's what my job is. That's what our job is to dig deeper into these things and figure out what's legit and what's not. So, to the average fan, it's rough out there. It's tough to dissect this. And I would say one thing, when you look at a Keith Pompey, Keith covers the team. Keith is with the team every day. He travels. As far as I know, he is the only beat reporter that travels with the team on basically every road trip. So, his information, it's going to be pretty darn good because he's with the team. He covers the team. And that's like, guys, to me, I tend to lean on more guys who cover the team. And then also when you're talking about guys who maybe don't necessarily cover the team, the very credible national guys who there are plenty of. There are plenty of guys and gals that are very trustworthy, very respectable, have really great sources around the league and report, very well and get their facts straight. So I think that's, if you're an average fan and you don't have, and you have a job and you don't have time to decipher all of this, I would say always lean on certain people that, and like, I'm going to be the type of person, like when I'm responsible with what I tweet, man. I'm not going to just say stuff to say stuff. And if there is something that doesn't sit right with me or doesn't feel right to me, I'm not going to retweet it. And I'm probably not going to comment on it. So I think it's a matter of kind of building, that good Twitter following of as far as like, if you're follow the people that are credible. And if you're seeing something that's not amongst those people, you really need to dissect it and you really need to take some time to think whether or not you think it's legit.
And then one more Embiid point before I let you go. Embiid, he had a lot of things. I love Ben Simmons. I want to play with him. He went all that. But then the final tweet is, to me, the kicker. Because Embiid says, and I'm quoting, for clarity, I love the criticism. I love when I'm told I can't do something. It makes me work harder to prove everyone wrong. But not everyone is built like that. And it's just like, Joel, you just went on for all this stuff, and then you just dropped that at the end of the conversation, and it's just like, it just feels like we're back to square one all over again.
Yeah, I mean, so if I'm being honest, I thought it was innocent. I don't think he meant anything by it as far as like it being directed towards Ben Simmons. I could certainly see how someone could make that inference. This is why Twitter kind of sucks, because you get 160 characters, and that's all you got to work with. And it's, sometimes stuff gets lost. Sometimes, messages don't get conveyed properly. That's when we talk about text messages versus phone calls. Like, that's kind of the thing. Sometimes stuff gets lost. And I think this is an instance where I thought it was innocent. I don't think he meant anything by it. I thought largely his point in that whole tweet storm, which, by the way, I think maybe he should have stopped after like 3 tweets. That maybe is where he should have stopped. Not that I completely disagree with everything he said, and not that I totally agree with everything he said, but I think maybe he should have stopped after like 3 tweets. But I think the main message he was trying to convey is that he has a great respect for Ben Simmons. He has enjoyed playing with Ben Simmons, which, quite frankly, Josh, I've never gotten the impression that that's not true. In my years covering the team, I've always felt like they had a mutual respect for one another. They weren't best friends off the court. Rarely guys are. That's not always the case. They have very different personalities. They have very different interests. So that's not surprising. But I thought they definitely had a mutual respect for one another. I thought they always liked playing together. And as he said, you check the numbers, and over the years, they are better together than they are apart. That's just been a fact throughout both of their careers when they have played together. So I think that was the main crux of his thread, was just to say, hey, like, whatever you're going to say about mine and Ben Simmons' relationship, it's not true. I like Ben Simmons. I want him back. I respect him. And the other stuff was just, I think, just him going off. He was there, and he just kept going with it.
Well, also on Twitter is Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. You can catch all of his dissemination of Sixers news and content over at Liberty Ballers Now. So check them out and follow Paul for all your Sixers insight as well. Paul, appreciate you jumping on today. Always good to chat with you. Take care of yourself, my man.
You too, Josh. Very good to see you, my friend.